Redo. 1. Agreement swerves a sonnet to the consonants. Sparrows. As a wind blows over the twigs of a rough nest entered by a bird that impales a vowel on its beak. When unable to think of two things unless we think twice, the rower in the water jerks to travel. Her autobiography is 90% picaresque. While thus moralizing, all we have done is shout the name of someone we know. In the intellectual water, the rattling sweaters and the fluffy rocks seem to be wheezing in the wind. As a child, so simple with sincerity, I found it unbearable to have friends while inhibited with sympathy. I had them. Some were A. aggressive and beloved, B. consistently contradictory, or C. casual and splay like raffia. With a Freudian sense of fun, we felt remorse for our most aggressive howdies. But given fire, the discovery of water was inevitable. Clouds amass like the glaze on clay, buttery birds collect in a glossy sky, the fat moon coming our way looms out and slides. Anarchies sleep in this overabundance of time like inert technicalities. A nameless crowd, I wonder whose, reminds me of unmortared masonry. Tomorrow is the same day in my experience, but sleep can only give us the pleasure of pleasure, generous if we're awake. 2. Nostalgia is the elixir drained from guilt. I've been writing. With the fingers of my non-writing hand, I patted the dashboard. "Hi, car." It responded, "Hello, Mommy." The city is un-car-like. She who had lived all her life in the city and absorbed all its laws in her blood, madness really, she waited for the light to change and stepped into the traffic on red. Objects always flicker. Rain threatens, but what can it do? Knocking, buzzing, sloshing. Somewhere between empty and full, the excitement is mental, internal, as they remain urgently still. We have stayed in the city, over which it really is raining. Reflections water the gardens. The fields that pressed in the passing landscapes were immobilized by trees, uneven individual glowing. The photograph craves history. The automobile drove to the photograph. It faces me as I awake. 3. The sun is just appearing. The first bulky, clogged, distorted moment was dairy yellow, an instant magnificent with claustrophobia. How could one contemplate paradise without thinking about love? Rushing out into the open, I believing it to be... Sometimes it takes just such a motivated coincidence. Gold from a petrified honeycomb lies under the iron-like utility poles. My merchant horse whickers. My dog yaps in the park, always lamenting, marvelous, perfect. She sees her subjects in an incomplete, benevolent focus. Meanwhile, a great music forms in the driveway, a band of finches. It seems as if everything might be somewhere in that mass of sound, where bound together with the lyricism of wasps and spiders, they appear to crave their own innate activity. And going by the usual criteria for knowledge, I vowed not to laugh, but to scatter things. In the bowl of my left palm I placed my right forefinger to signify A, feeding, B, a batch, C, the appraisal, D, too much consolation is like a forgetfully boundless vow. 4. Imagine observing one's fear of death metaphorically by falling in love. And then today becomes tomorrow as one steps out of the bathtub into the pond, aloof, and down over the ditch. The water splits, opal in the sunlight, a moment when 1, 2, 5, my words are the terminus of a long train of thought, and the sand dries. The romantic intellect, the word is unavoidable, takes in the excellence of life on the whole. Thinking drops, our daylight is like a ball, and then leaps back. Lights come on in the water, because daylight is domesticity's underline, and the pace of the movements lit by them is altered, but inconsistently. Some things go faster, others slower, and thus my flailing arms altogether miss the sluggish sleeve of my coat, and my mind has arrived at the park long before my legs slowly carry me to my front door. Thus grotesquely elongated with longing, two courses of experience meet. How capably! A bouquet adds weight. A dog chases the rolling orange. The orange opens, and something is removed. A telephone. A man is ringing, and he's divided horizontally. He has in tow the stillness of a barge, which takes on the burden of the excellence of happiness, that nameless reliving spent in life. Commitment, that sort of autobiography. Confession, that sort of misunderstanding, like infidelity to an impossible task. Who can take it over? It is as moral for night to fall. 5. Angels, it seems, don't always know they are moving. Spring is not my instruction, mildly prime, the remnants of a tremendous example. The tree set upright to give more room jiggles in the wind. I've a complicated sense of injustice, solitude unused, while vibrating to music I draw on my napkin in a small, sufficient apartment. In a time of brain and desire, patience is the mental equivalent of running. 6. Adolescence. Each fact gains mobility. Imagine enjoying that little bit of life naively, as on a postcard associated with a gaping landscape or a sound that resembles its source. Apparently, what the throat thinks, we drink. Down the street, a milky-colored, connective white dog stops, sits, looks at his tail with the impatient but suspicious attitude usually reserved for old friends. He pretends to have a single serious schedule requiring solitude, like the shy man who attempts to intend to have no one to talk to, then scratches his left ear with his left hind leg as if spending money, and stands up and sniffs like a man who has just rented an apartment at the base of an undernourished tree. Unbearable anticipation of interruptions, whose cacophony is familiar as the air. And cram, the great misfortune, otherwise I got flattened out, the platters spin away wobbling, with congeniality befalling words, with the inevitable self-congratulatory description of a landscape. I love water with sufficient details. We were real young, and I was so thrilled to get wall-to-wall carpeting that I just rolled over and over on the floor. Resignation, defiance, hysteria is thrilling. Normal possessiveness, which is itself crucial to a sense of direction, disappears, sets forth a doctrine of efficient lessons. I, with my murky eyesight, should have good ears, having been a thing convulsively, combines and combines, never creates, brushing the flies of terrible nonsense in my head. There are pigments in every probability. The doorknob's hole in the plaster wall, a house in the pasture, the things individuality grips with dependent desire. 7. A person finds a certain pleasure in standing at the very edge of a cliff and thinking, what if I jump, with expansive sensations. Suddenly swings the sea and looks on with stupid interest. The rain falls jelly-like. Repentance and determination make a white beginning anti-sunwise. Even in post-rational society, the word is like a foster dog, repeating the same thing over and over, her resonant voice resounding with a little natural reverb in the deep, wet, murky morning air. A dangerous situation. The child will be run down. I throw myself at her, knocking her to safety, with interruptions. I couldn't steal the shells from nature. On the other hand, I couldn't simply throw them away. Eventually, somewhere on the beach, I drop them, but when or where, I don't remember. Thus each new bit of knowledge, gratitude for myopia, etc., merely contributes to a wider romanticism, a series of changes sprinkled with a little melody, as if the traffic were throwing out fragments of glass in the milky air. My claustrophobic luck, hilly, the sound of the traffic is almost maternal. My mouth in eating suggests, "We made the rent, how cavalier." The plates secure order in eating. The house states the unsatisfied prototype. A car itself is an armed bookshelf. My claustrophobia is as sound porous as a wood wall. 8. Innocence. There is a red car in the driveway, ready to drive away. Awkward faith in the eager present tense is naive. A gardener is a poor critic of this. To be sorry is funny. Carnations of Kleenex are scotch-taped to the swinging refrigerator door and fill the glass bowl, the Pyrex. Sometimes the simplest identifications may be a cruel innocence. The lake was known for her fleas. I'd open the curtains for light. You know how families are, to be up before anyone was serious, but everything is indirect, spots sympathetic units, while the psyche mediated, it's scientifically self-conscious. This in turn was romantic as its literary character. Autobiographically, repentance yields to determinism with restrictions, innocence. 9. The sun has risen as high as a man's hat. An authoritative light is reducing action to powder or mist. Freight, panic is a psychotechnicality or a skyline suffusion. As for we who like to think logically, astonished. Color has faded away from the vacant lot, which resembles a straw bag. In the restaurant I sat alone, listening subjectively to sounds beyond my peripheral vision, intimate and similar. The reversible heh of a yawn. The pronoun ya has long since lost its meaning. I want a faster logic, instantaneously consistent. The diamond shape of the Doppler effect is wide-hipped as domesticity. The floor was littered with small oranges and graham crackers, and an oblate, fluffy, low-slung brown and white dog-like pet was skimming around in this muzzy scene, while two children, they had been taking turns swinging one-handed over a plate, while casually but tenderly cradling an infant, were calling it tui or tui or tuui with meticulous distortions. It's true, I tend to get overstimulated among friends. Still, if they like me, they visit. Travelers have no day. 10. Coverage. My fingers are reduced to 3 for ease in writing. My nerves are a management and a graphic design. Typical are formulations, like the morning. To tell in ambitious aphorisms, news-based, delight in explanations proves what nature is, eyes fumbling over an anecdotal close wall pattern, the uneven partial idleness of apples, and to create an arena. Discontinuity, in my experience, to me means radical coverage. With garrulous scanning, as the cobweb that humiliates the space that waves, constantly distracted, the vulnerability not of the fragile but of the fake, those whom it assimilates with anticipation. Now it is August 6 to 7, broad and flexible. Nature allows us to explore its effect on perception while giving satisfaction. Thus the clouds, which seem to be entering the world from one spot in the sky, mediate time by taking on light, and accumulate sound just as it's the desert highway that sucks in and dries out the landscape. The wind thickens, and the bird songs modulate paragraph, muscles, esophagus, a hard-windowed cave. Safely in the dark of some backyard, a chained dog chiefly barks into the discontinuity that absorbs emotional work. 11. Social movements accompany music with repetition. We begin. Then we invert the sounds, left shoe on right foot. We rush to the window and shout in a social voice, "Family!" Mother was strict, this is Daddy. He is in the gentle hold of his imagination. Still the equidistance maintains its fantastic symmetry. The door slams downstairs, toilet flushes. On the street, car engine revs. The radio blares full of bass. Children outside shout so that every word achieves its peak. 2 dogs, 1 small and 1 deep, are barking and the phone rings. The telephone is a weapon. New noises and new American rhythms address the world with strain. In my sentence, only a message. Oh, clipboard. All aspens are the same tree. Clone, widening loose leaf. The camera is a scissor, wipes the message from the sentence. The fingers reduce the surface. The holiday makers are an audience at sea. A railroad track follows the passing waves. In the waves there are 2 levels to which people calmly go, up to their knees and up to their elbows. At noon, standing there on the line, in no particular hurry, it feels less like water than fire. 12. I am the subject of an egotistical yearning to improve. Was my soul assigned? Under cover of the possessive, a man outside claims his dog is half wolf. This is like speech finding a sonnet. Elliptical vigor and a good appetite. It was easy work sandblasting, spending all day telephoning. There was a box of zippers that were all mixed up. We arrived at a safe resemblance. I was on my own in Europe, so full with workers and soldiers you couldn't walk through to collect the fares, so I sat there, and as they got off I took the money. Know a stone wall when you see one. A transfer of the world into poetry? Mistaking drowsy for lusty. The anecdote one is saving to tell with direct desire. 13. Determinism. Putting facts by the thousands into the world, the toes take off with an appealing squeak, which the thumping heel follows, confidentially, the way men greet men. Sometimes walking is just such elated pumping. As the dog bumps its head, the fog clears, and it's sunny for the sonnet scouts march to. I was humming to myself, but making the sound in my head, not my neck, where it remained resonating against my temples, all the elements of which count, wordlessly wars, prank youth heavily altogether. They flicker in order fully to correspond with the perceptibility of life. Unfortunately, this is a very busy time in which too much is noticeable. As news fills the sheets, topical blooms fill the streets and slope against the coast. People think I have written an autobiography, but my candor is false. I hear a few shots slouching at my realism. As if corralled or slowed by cold, all that intentional and unintentional experience is unable to stop or change. Restlessly I moved to a new position. Spots and postures, that's all. I am myopic with determination. And so, just as one might run one's fingers around the edge of a glass to make it squeal, similarly, in the hollow night a car circles the edges of my consciousness, and this sentence is emitted. But of course occasionally one sinks into the sand that fills the locale with its clean, opinionless lingering. The sea is being swept off near the seafront. Every dime is a meter piece. The shore is very thin. Days wash past at their normal level wherever the shadows break. 14. Planet and flat flesh, who can keep me? as if it weren't really mine to complete. The sky swings out from shore, from work, a binge of convention, when everything appeared unrecognizable, is muffled. Like an adolescent, I skipped breakfast. The appeasing element and everything was in motion, but me waving up and down in farewell, as if embarrassed arrogantly. Superstition is mostly the expectation of trouble. The photograph craves fresh traditions of an attempted jealousy in the sun blurred by gusts of pressure.
He was a moral dwarf in a body as solid as ice. Everywhere he looked, he felt fear and evasion. No notice, no location bore any resemblance to the true form of these cinders. Intransigence, pestering. It was the logic of insurgence, a stone door opening onto a dirt floor. For 3 weeks he stayed there, only 50 feet from the geyser, watching his footsteps rattle. From time to time he rolled up the floor and looked to the expanse below. The physical present, he would say to himself, is unrelated to the physical afterthought. Towns steamed in the light, a glimmer of the ghosts of the people who had lived there. Personality is barbarity, so we eat at each other with waxing spirits, when all the time we are on the wane. No stop exists, except what we manufacture the need for. The heart is a steel brace that men use to erect their sagging spirits. I am not I because my sister has stolen a pear, and I have tasted of its pit. The light is stuck. Mourners gnaw at the columns. Allegorical micturation has swept the guest halls of the art galleries, and the undermasses wail in the background to iambic beat. Sludge is proclaimed sludge, hairdos hors d'oeuvre, as the soiled face of inverted cardiorasty, a.k.a. genital fetish, rears its mushy brow. The excellence of our gifts humbles us into cleverness, when before we were only foolish. Blessed are the grieved, for they at least have seen their inheritance. The rest wait in maxi vans to collect as available. The bitter coke of Jimmy Carter, the greased palm, the adored swan, all are crepuscular, dilated, dogged, dictated. For others, orgasm is achieved only by means of words without any tactile contact. Some married women report depraved husbands who force them to submit to this practice. It may be cheap, but it's not worth that much. From the Ministry of Psychological Science. Normal minds never run adrift when there are no environmental factors to poison them. Exposure to big businessmen, right-to-life Christians, military officers, career managers, and New York Times cultural editors causes otherwise healthy young people to become perverts. These types, motivated by greed for money and power and authority, belong to the lower human strata. They are classed as moral imbeciles. They are all, or most of them, antisocials with pronounced defective aesthetic sense. It is not uncommon, however, to find them brilliant and nimble-witted, but they are plausible and ready liars. They lie even when the truth might be more serviceable. Lifestyles that would arouse horror and repugnance in normal persons are sought after by such individuals. People of this type resent being spoken to courteously. They want to be addressed roughly. Even among those classed as intelligent, they derive actual gratification in exposing their ignorance to one another. Many have anesthetic consciences. Pricks with needles cause no pain. Orgasms can only be achieved by this type of pervert by enacting or fantasizing racist, sexist, ageist, or authoritarian acts. Having once been an unwilling witness to conversation between two such individuals, I can say it was the most disgusting, absolutely the most nauseating spectacle one can imagine. Solitude and contentment are the product of the mystical. We are never alone and, by rights, never at peace. Such is a space that, called into being, or given, transforms everything from what we know it to be, mishandled by the world, to what it never was, blessed. Or handled, but since there is no correct way to handle, it amounts continuously to the same. A bed of smoke and pearls, tripped by the sum, troped by the tune. No cordon ever warms the soul, but a simple, costless gesture may. Yet the act is not made but found, nor yet discovered. Nothing hides. So begins the long march to the next world. Custom is abandoned outright as a criterion of moral conduct. Everything must be justified before the courts of the new criteria, which spring out of the old with the resourcefulness and tenacity of the truly ingrained. The theory of primary colors is rejected as elitist empiricism, and the wavelengths of the spectrum take their proper and equal place in the constitution of perception. Garrulousness is taken for honesty. Related to this, the excitement, the dancing around, articulating itself in terms of these, and getting, this might, the sanctioned drive and concentration, more obviously through dinner, TV, in some sense entertained. I tried all kinds of things, open-ended, divergent level, as to rehearsal, to assume the spirit of, balanced against, practically speaking, an unresolvable fend, as harmful regardless, at which in was assessment, without circumstance to enter, to be found in, and often strategic, almost total compensation, hallmark comparably, innately, literally, operate by overstatement, endorsement, restriction, as if it was already having our, as the most, she or he along, suspect that which, putting aside as such, cadres of the steaming identification insofar, in which segmenting, say to stay, technologically gathered, etc., into mass utter anomaly with, if you hold get-ahead hotbed, fosters as being outside one, is alertness, or for tapped, assigned, passed over, inverted, a highly visible necessary, and those is a safety valve to as usual, designated but saved from the meantime, would present, there is also, apart from these, regarding our largely. The tubs rectify obliquely whatever they decant. But this is not a guarantee of much more than ingestion. Whether there is a forge or a spill such that what is represented is regarded with spears, or does alarm come along like what's the vision and what the version, a bland potentate of flack? These are ordinary triads. Why not recover the innuendo of stultification, the gray gloat of glory? For instance, hopping a pail, chewing a nail, while all along a bone spoke in the crag. Gushes of static cling. It is not the eye, but its gleam, of which we dream. This is my suffice to a world of toast, which so raptures the spirits, delights the gust, and gives such airs to the countenance as are not to be imagined by those who have not tried it. Apostate rings girdered by avalanche, whose history demands carbon, which insinuate formaldehyde. Discipline demands not looking back, depotentiate dirigible door jams, districted lapilli, thus extended. Sworn fuss, brazen discretion. Shuts, tourmaline. Indigestion apparently apocrypha. Red line. Beeline to inadequacy. Repossesses pose. By posse? Integration of burn at distal curve. Go, gum, go. Governed getaway. Resettlement crematoria. Dog's duty. Prioritate. What's in it for Johns Hancock? Oblique cartel. Gummed up gust. Free clogging restored. Mystified. The harmony of harangue. Dodeca-do, dad, mom. With all the passion of a plum. Bowl of milk. Ha! See end of Adobe. Information about the rate on purchase and the balance by which each is judged. The balance of every purchase is an average daily balance. Each daily purchase is added in the life cycle for, as applicable, purchase incurred before the conversion date and purchase incurred on or after the conversion date. Each day is begun with the opening balance for the life cycle for whatever purchase, and all new purchase and other debts are added, including any posted that day, subtracting all payment and other credits posted to the principal since the start of the life cycle, including any posted that day. The daily balance for purchase incurred on or after the conversion date is as follows. Each day is begun with the opening balance for the life cycle for purchase, and all new purchase and other debts posted to the principal since the start of the life cycle, including any posted that day, subtracting as before, including any posted that day. However, there is no balance for purchase incurred either before or on or after the conversion date, in any life cycle in which there is no previous balance for purchase, or in which all payments and other credits applied to purchase for the life cycle at least equal the previous balance for all purchase for the life cycle. Thus will these hovers goad, the lurks amount to saddle its detour, relinquishing two snares, and a brandy-colored drain, inside themselves, and 6 pace on, to halt at precipice. No peace abjures, like the bleat of desalinated tears, with which to wash tomorrow's course inveigh. Consider stance a suck upon, portent's languid sneer. The world grows simpler, or I, a jangle in its pores, so simple one might dote upon refrains or balk at bomb. No other vision exists except the single crane, they call it tracking, on a green-brown backing. Neither for what or without. An incredible growling hush besets or sets over this pall of purpose, testing the certitude of fortitude, the quiescence of restitution, everything as it always was or will, would, want to be, ferreting a cataract from a sublime act, the knees and pancreas of boisterous dispose, mildless and omitted emotions. Everything external to turn of the last out of accumulated, dig slowly, piles trying about, which were flaw, fugitive, indeed lights, but when mind of stumbles that on accurate has to do which became early, say at, might just as it is clash, that by mainly intentions, subjected, as if were officious tone, nickel and dimed, or being any given to do, something that on our you should, that is, to handle, even come up with what amounts to, for keeping or setting of respect of lack, literally trying to prolong, complain apparent, is to rather condescended, correlative as to blind, off, by, attitude. Substitution dubbed. The clothes are clogged, the blistering revamped, all the pleonasms gone away. What chord, cowed, lingers as the lurker takes its nightly flight? Beyond these realms, ingots made of air, or not quite air, that less were substance of a dream, or beam remote into exaction, obliterated grace of stubborn hand. Or in which ornate matter is dispersed to the sarcophagi of circumstance, or in which, laminated by the swell, torches cascade in fractious notions left as elevated, or whether who may say, withstanding lock, block, and fork, indiscriminate originaries, reputable gulls, while wistfully wandering at the end platform, vouchsafing there, I will already spatter and dejectable detonate, refurbishment to the high cantorial yarn per yard would be cantankerously mortuary, which fails, hails. The new begins again, slips behind, but more to wish than to redress. Sacrament of superfluidity in the realm of frowns. There is a crimson counter, an alabaster fountain on the other side. Where do you want to ride? It's all a matter of dejection and sublimation, illusion and collusion. So-called surreal surcease, badger endeavor to enjoin. Here are heroes, bison with functioning mindsets, dictaphone artists, domestic doodlers, the cupcake of tranquility, the earache of there is neither matter nor form, only smell, taste, bite. Eyes hide by their disclosure. There is only substance, structure, twin fears of an unduplicating repetition, the sandstorm of grief, the presentlessness of distribution. As far-fetched ministers to its own resolve, purpose alone is the proprietor of the poignant, vesture of solace's lazy haze. Keep a curb on your brain. The heart beats thrice where the soul has lost its foot. The campground of larceny is the foremast of destination's deprecation. Still, no teleology holds here. Gather what rims you may, hold tight to clandestine animation, basalt aggravation. Out of a pure sludge, and to sludge shall you remain. The air of circumstance, the in of inarticulation. Stepping off a train, a station liner, a mothball, floating into incandescent frostbite. How these avenues arise in arrears, joining our Savior, boring our way here. I've got, why not get strip cash, milk of? He's made an art of not remembering, the pierced fluidity of a smile that battles reportorial mink stoles, solvent greasers in gumptious dodecahedrons. Why wet these belts, revamp attire, milkmaid of respect, jilted of dismay? Go, get, gone. Perception does not merely serve to confirm pre-existing assumptions, but to provide orgasms with new information. Standing around the kitchen, talking about boats. A tool of philosophy. Who, which, garner anyway, anywhere, why? Pains fly dirigibles, or foment surface shimmer, chimera. Beige lofts the two of us, whatever, signaling retreat, enhance, repeat, entrance. Slow beats the bugles on Murray's soured block, clappity-clack, jiffity-jig. There is no refusal that outlives handprints, suction weight. Thence thwart of formicate biscuit cutter. All these seas. A clue Uggs butter. Vats. Many people have trouble with everyday activities such as speaking, thinking, responding, dreaming, eating, sleeping. A crutch shares the weight of burden, protecting without shielding, but should not be used without specific instructions. Untoured by these detach with salmon or scrubmate severance, not anywhere detained by oaken chair, wavering as the wind whirls around Brenda Starr, eschatological venison. I abide by later, egging tomahawk remonstration. Or is this gulled, posted, and foreshortened? Who activates you biscuit us insects? Insects. Colonies of spears, a minority of hears. Cares, caned. Whoever therefore blemishes into interlock, defamed retainer, absorbent factotum, which wish reserves our moi. Here he lunges, interpeptide nudge, at workmanlike manure, sharp presser. Ache of the pancreas, fate of the polyurethaned didact, emblazoned by tries. The flip side of organdy, still lace face, fretted surprise, jam, whistler, an or am emendation of beside, all preemptive repair, gliding in indico boxcars, hiding in Viewmaster canister, Golan Heights, swollen price. No scheme completes the falling down of chairs, of cards, or igloos sprayed in camel dust. The motion spares the inbred count, where clumps at curious Coventry steam seas of sailors' sorrows. From this adoration unrolls more smoke, eyed voyeurs with whooping coughs. These afterward, strolling out of their lofts and heliotropes, displacing memorized variety with hallucinogenic contempt, lather up their secretions and spew them at, convicted of charm, conspicuous with greed. And now, just when you thought it was time to stop thinking again, Texton introduces the Whipmaster Valorizer. Yes, just when you thought you were stuck in the same old shop-worn anxieties and tired-out guilt feelings, the Whipmaster Valorizer has arrived, revolutionizing the psychopoetics industry. In just seconds, you can turn your sordid dreams and ambitions into cherished res intellectiones. The Valorizer uses a unique twofold action. Negative associations are effaced from habitual cognitions by a sanitized derealization process. Simultaneously, positive associations are affixed to these cognitions by means of thousands of tiny idealization crystals, a unique adhesion agent. The Whipmaster Valorizer is available exclusively from Texton, your better living through alchemistry company. What is this? A marathon? Strolling in admonition, bowling in derivation, weave our way in mordant display. For a day is not a dome, nor an estuary a delegation. Reminiscent of restitution, perennial towel master, tuck away bonfire, cloaks the longing for largesse, museum of double blinds, clubbable behind, wearless weathers. Locations lock the far side of. Not that riddles, little by little, a memento of seed, oasis of reproach, gust the beatitude's tiny stare, lording it over sword sway. Imperial allure at ground zero. Forget, forfeit. The journey is stern benefactor to the departing caboose. Ride the querulous hound.